Okay, let's go. You want to know the reason why you should use your rooks in chess is because your opponent is not using their rooks. But you know what? I feel like I'm going to talk about you using your rooks and you're not going to do it. And you know what? Don't use any of your friggin' pieces. Just don't use anything. I'm sick of this shit. I'm deleting my YouTube channel. You finished having your tantrum? Yeah, I'm good. So I see newer players will go the whole game and they won't touch their rooks. Even players with some experience, the rooks will just sit there the whole game and not do anything. So here's a typical example from two players who know how to play chess. They understand that you're supposed to develop your pieces. Okay, it's White's turn. So it's White's turn, and he's like, okay, well, I'm going to put the pawn there to control that square. So Black does his move. And then White's like, I'm going to redeploy my knight. Okay, Black castles. Okay, so White continues. Oh, I'm going to control this other square here. Stop pieces from going there. And so now Black, who's been around the block and understands things, moves his queen to the second rank and connects his rooks. Look at that. Oh. Okay, White's still... maneuvering. Okay, so now he takes the rook from A8 and puts it on the D file. This rook is now developed. Yes, your pawn's there, but the rook is now hitting the central squares. Okay, White's kind of not sure what's going on. So White makes some kind of move. He thinks he's attacking the bishop there. He's pretty happy with himself. So now Black develops his last piece and rook. So now, look at this position. Black's rooks are on the central files. You might think, well, that's not really doing that much. Look, at your level, at your skill level, the position at some point is going to blow open. Your rooks will be on the center files. His rooks will be, this one will never move the whole game. That one at least is protecting this, but that's just it. So, okay, so that's the basics about getting your rooks on the central files. To increase the power of your rook, you want to put a rook on an open file. Here is an example. The queen is moved to connect rooks, so there is an open file here. That means that one of your pawns is not blocking the file, so it's open. You put your rook there, and you put your rook on the open file. We just talked about, generally if there's no open files, try to have your rooks in the central squares. But if you have an open file, put your rook on the open file. Now, how do you make open files? Well, let's quickly show how to make open files. A second ago, the position was like this. So there's no open files here. So what White did was, well, I'm going to open a file so I can have a file for my rook. And then he went there. File is open. Another way to open files is through piece exchanges, where the piece is taken back with the pawn. So here's a typical London opening maneuver. Black hits the London bishop. It likes to drop back. Now, Black takes, and bang. This rook, which most players aren't going to touch anyway, is now fully developed. Look at this rook, full power. I know Mensa here. Mensa likes to castle queenside when that rook file's open, and then she just starts blasting. So let's talk about rooks, doubling rooks on an open file. So you have an open file. If you double rooks on an open file, that is some power. That is very powerful. Okay, here's a really good reason to have a rook on an open file. White's rook is on an open file. Black is attacking this pawn. It's White's turn. White's like, okay, well, rook take pawn. I could defend it. But no, the rook can give a back rank checkmate. The king has nowhere to run. So that's another good reason to have a rook on an open file. Makeshift, you want to tell them about the 7th rank? Okay, yes. One of the most powerful motifs in rooks on open files is getting your rook to the 7th rank. Okay, in this position, White plays rook to the 7th rank. Okay, so now the rook is like blasting away on the 7th rank. All the pawns are there of your enemy. Yeah, that's right. So rook to the 7th is super powerful. That's where most of the pawns live. So now in this position, these two pawns are forks, so Black's got to figure out which one to defend. Say he protects that one. You capture there. And then black's turn now. So he wants to get rid of the rook. Now he attacks that one. And the rook is just super powerful. So if you can get open lines and get your rook to the 7th rank. Show him the really powerful thing you can do with 2 rooks. Okay, so we're going to talk about rooks doubled up on the 7th rank. So first of all, there's the open file. So white decides to drop down to the 7th rank because he wants to go to the 7th rank and he wants a double rook. So black does something. Okay, and then so now white has doubled up rooks in the open file. So black's like, okay, well, I'm going to move my king up. I can't really challenge the rooks. And then white does the following. He steps to the side. White wants to bring his rook here. Black should do something about it. He should attack that rook or attack that rook. But black's like, I'm not going to do anything about it. There's no problem in my position. Black goes there, and then this rook comes down. And there it is. This is super powerful. 2 rooks in the 7th rank are absolute killer. In this position, I hope the first thing you notice is white centralized his rooks, where black's rooks are just sitting there all game. So here's an example of something called a rook lift. A rook lift is when you bring your rook up to the 3rd rank and it can now go in front of your own pawns. So this is a good attacking move. White sees that black's king's wide open. Black doesn't sense the danger. Moves his queen to say here. And then, can you find the mate in 2 moves? Probably 3. I guess he could block with the queen. But anyway, so check. Check, and the king, if the king moves, then checkmate. So that's an example of an effective rook lift. You can also use rook lifts, like say there's no mate in that position or you don't want to attack, say. You can use rook lifts as a form of doubling up rooks. Here's an example of using your rook to open a file to attack the enemy king. So you want to keep your pawns unmoved if you can. But if you have to move it, because this was hitting here, so black's like, oh, I have to move it. I don't want to lose my pawn. So then white goes like this. He moves his rook here, and he is preparing the following idea. He's going to push here, and then push one more. If these pawns are exchanged, he now has a rook open file right to the enemy king. So that's how you crack open a king with your rook. So I'll close by saying, please use your rooks, or he'll throw a tantrum and there'll be pieces all over the place and I went flying too and hurt my head. Sorry about that. Move your rooks because your opponent's not going to. So do something with your rooks. Yes, develop all your minor pieces. And then after that, this is the key moment. In this kind of a position, even if you have some experience, you're just gonna I'm gonna move the bishop and the knight, and I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna put your friggin' queen on the 2nd rank somewhere and get your rooks rocking and rolling. Stop your bullshit.